Do you think confidence is a key component to visualization?
If you're going to doubt anything, doubt your limits, not your potential. The limits that we have a lot of the time are mental. People think of visualization, they think of outcome-based, often confused with manifestation.
What is the difference between a visualization and manifestation?
They're the best athletes in the world. We'd never say they manifested their medals. It's because they wired their brain for success.
Unless you believe that you can get out of a situation, unless you believe that there's a route other than, how can you visualize?
Logic can take you from A to B, but imagination can take you everywhere. What you create in your mind can happen.
How do I make sure that I'm using visualization as a tool for growth rather than an escape from the present?
Your mind is like a puppy, and if you don't train it, it will shit everywhere.
Yeah. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Mind. Today, you're about to listen and watch an incredibly powerful conversation with Maya Raichoora. She's an expert in visualization, mindset transformation, and peak performance. Maya has helped countless entrepreneurs, athletes, and other people unlock their potential through the science of visualization, and she's here today to break it down for us. I'm so glad that you've chosen to listen or watch this episode because we're diving into the questions that I know that have been on your mind, and if I'm honest, have been on my mind too. What exactly is visualization and how does it differ from manifestation? How can I use visualization in my life today, especially when I already feel so overwhelmed? And does it actually work, or is this just another buzzword that everyone is jumping on the trend to? Maya not only answers these questions, but she also shares practical tools and tips that you can start using right now to reshape your mindset and create the life that you want. If you enjoy this episode, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification and leave a review. It really helps me to bring more incredible and inspiring guests onto this podcast so that we can have more conversations like these. Thank you so much for your support so far. Let's deep dive into this episode. Maya, hello.
Hi.
Welcome to Millennial Mind.
I know, I'm very excited.
I'm very excited to have you here. I feel that there are so many questions I want to know about visualization. But the first question I want to ask you is, why should someone stay and listen to the full podcast today?
Ooh. So I think the thing I realized about, visualization, mental fitness as a whole, there's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of lack of education. But I think the big thing is that the tools and ideas that I talk about have been around for centuries, but they've just been... It's like they've been hidden. They're like secrets that no one else knows about. And so I think if you listen to the podcast, you're going to learn some things that could genuinely impact your life in an amazing way.
And how has visualization impacted your life?
Oh, big question.
Let's go from the beginning.
So I've now been practicing visualization for, I'd say it's about 8 years now. So I started at the age of about, 16. I didn't just see a technique and then started learning it. I was going through a time where I had been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and it was a technique that was helping me kind of find hope in my life again. So I actually learned it in hospital.
Wow.
But as I continued to research it and learn about it, I realized that actually it's a technique used by a lot of athletes or high performers. And now I will use visualization to basically think, feel, and perform the best I can. And that looks different at different stages of my life. Like sometimes that is recovering from an illness. Sometimes that is building a global company. Sometimes that's speaking on stage. And so it's a very versatile technique that you can basically take advantage of your brain. And I'm still tapping into it, which I find really exciting. Like, yes, I've been doing it for, 7-8 years, but I'm only at the beginning as well. And that's what's kind of crazy, actually.
So you were diagnosed with ulcerative colitis at 16.
Yes.
Talk to me about how visualization helped you. Number one, how you first were open to trying something like that, because I know when I was 16, if someone had told me that technique, I would have said, that's not going to work, and I'd have been very dubious about it. Secondly, I want to know how it really transformed and helped you.
Okay, so I'll start with why was I open to the technique? I wasn't, if I'm honest. And, I remember a lot of people saying, oh, you should try meditation, you should do this. I think what it came down to was pure desperation. I wasn't, hands open being like, oh my gosh, yay, let me try this. it was a point in my life where I genuinely had no other option other than surgery at the time. But I was, 17 and being faced with a decision to be like, do you either take out your colon and live with the stoma bag, or is there another way? And there wasn't. And I'd been through every type of medication possible. So for me, I did stumble on it by chance. It wasn't on purpose. But I think how it helped me is the really exciting part, because initially I used it to see myself walking. So to put it into context, I'd been in hospital for about a week.
Okay.
And I hadn't walked much. It's the type of the symptoms you get with colitis. It's all about, going to the loo and you're feeling a lot in your stomach. And so there'd be times where the only walking I was doing was to run to the loo, and it's just pure blood when you're there. But honestly, I wouldn't even be able to come back to my bed because of how much pain or energy I lost.
No.
I wouldn't be able to come back. So sometimes I'd have to just sleep on the loo. And this is in hospital, so it's obviously just a horrible situation. And so the idea of even living a normal life, let alone walking, running, doing anything, was just completely gone. And so it was the first application of it was where this nurse was like, well, okay, Maya, if you weren't in this room, where would you be? Initially, I thought it was quite a rude question, right? Because obviously I'm nowhere else. But that's where I was like, okay, let me close my eyes and let me see myself walking. That's it. Let me just see it. And when I opened my eyes, I was like, I kind of want this. I want to make this happen. And nothing obviously changed overnight, but I just kept doing it. I kept mentally rehearsing step by step, and then waving to the nurses. And then eventually I was walking back at home. I was then, I sometimes even went super far and saw myself running. And
Wow.
It seemed a little delusional at the time. But what I now know in hindsight is that I was training my brain and body to actually get better and actually make that my goal and train my muscles into doing that. And so eventually I did gain the strength to just take a few steps. Doesn't mean I wasn't in pain at times and things like that, but because I'd made it my goal and I was so laser focused, I was able to actually start making that change. So that was my first application of it. Then when I was like, okay, well, why did this help me? I started doing it a little bit bigger, and I wanted to study at uni. It's funny, if you were to ask me or ask any 17-year-old girl, what's your dream? It would definitely not be go to uni. But it was, I was really excited to make it happen. All my friends were going.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I applied the same principles, and I was like, right, what would it be like to study? What would it be like to be in the Bristol badminton kit? And I just made it so real for myself. I was like, you're there, what are you doing? Process it. Don't just see the outcome, actually process yourself there. And it just made it so achievable. I was like, I can do this. Wow. And of course, I took a year out to really recover because I wasn't physically there yet. But by seeing that goal and that vision so clearly, it was game changing. And then the last thing that was massive is, as I continued to do that, I started to learn about the third type of visualization. So there are 5. And the third one is creative. Now, creative visualization has been really used in medicine, specifically there are thought leaders like David Hamilton who have studied the placebo effect.
Right.
And what he showed is that actually when you are visualizing things like your pain or things like cancer cells or things like your immune cells, you can actually start impacting them. Now, I'm not a doctor, and I'm not saying you do this instead of medication, etc. But I found this really, really helpful, because when I was in that intense pain and nothing can help you, not even morphine, not even everyone tries everything, and it would just never go. I would close my eyes and I'd visualize these piranhas in my stomach, and they'd just be eating my insides, right? Eating them. And even visualizing it was painful. But then what I would do is I would constantly just shoot them all. I'd keep killing every single fish that I saw. And what was happening is I was first reminding my mind and body who had control over the pain. And that was me. I wasn't just letting it happen now. And then with time, the pain actually started to dissolve a little bit, because the brain really struggles to know if it's happening or not. And so I was able to harness, again, the power of visualization to actually, well, I'm going to say the word manipulate, but really it was to help me manage my pain. And so those were the three main ones I was using at the time for my illness specifically. But of course, since then, it's now, I guess, gone a bit beyond that.
When I'm listening to your story, one thing that I can really see is that you're very confident. Do you think confidence is a key component to visualization? Because unless you believe that you can get out of a situation, unless you believe that there's a route other than doing what you're doing, for in your case, taking medicine or having to have a huge operation, how can you visualize?
I didn't have the confidence when I started. I think what I kind of always come back to is when I was young, I used to be very confident. Then I lost it all.
Right.
So it's been a really interesting process having to build it up again. And I think naturally, you know, when you're going through so many hospital visits and you forget how to socialize, you know, you don't feel like a woman, let alone are in the real world. Of course, you lose your confidence. And so the visualization, I wasn't doing it with confidence at the beginning. I had no self-belief.
Really?
I didn't think it could happen. And I think that's where the power really lies, is by repeating it so many times, your brain has no choice but to believe it.
But then how do you start repeating it? Because I'm just thinking about if I was in your situation.
Yeah.
What you're describing and what I've heard you speak so much about is how debilitating it was for you.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm thinking about people who are listening to this at home who are thinking, I'm stuck in a situation. I'm so low. I feel so low. I don't believe that this can work. I understand that I have no other choice but to think about it. But how do I take that first step to actually understand what I want?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, there's two parts to this. If you are genuinely feeling super, super low and you don't feel like there's a way out, I would start so small. Like, think about it. I started with a few steps.
Right.
Like, I wasn't starting with, oh my God, see myself building a company, stuff like that. I wasn't doing that. I literally was going a tiny thing. And I think that's important to know that if the gap is way too big, then of course it's going to feel a bit like, okay. And that's where this difference of, like, you know, like delusional thinking and just this idea of just manifest it. I think we've got to see this as, how am I training my brain here? And that's why I really did think, right, what is the first thing I want in this situation? And I think it was a massive reflection of where I was at the time, right? Like, I didn't need anything else. I just wanted to walk, feel a bit human. But I think if we go beyond that to that question of, like, how do you actually know what you want? I mean, I think it's the question we don't ask ourselves enough. And sometimes when I work with, like, you know, 50, 60-year-olds, they're still asking themselves the same question because they just haven't for so long. And I really think we should be asking ourselves, what do I want, multiple times, whether it's weekly, monthly, just keep asking yourself it, because it's a bit like a GPS, you're just aligning to it. Yeah. And if you don't know what you want, I would suggest first pursuing yourself as a person, like become the most healed and confident and kind person you can be. And that naturally will guide you towards the sort of things you want to do. Yeah. Because really, in the process of, yes, overcoming an illness, I was also becoming a better person. Like, I think it's really interesting. Before getting ill, you know, I was quite judgmental. I was quite insecure. I was still confident, but there were many things in my character that were very flawed.
You were also 16, by the way. Can I just
exactly,
emphasize that?
Exactly. But I think, you know, in some ways, there are going to be experiences in life that do force you to grow. And it did. Yeah. And I think it was interesting to be like, well, once I'd kind of aligned to the new character of mine, I didn't want to do the same things as I used to. I didn't enjoy laughing at the same things I used to. I guess my perspective and my values completely changed. But I think you can only do that when you start pursuing yourself and you start investing in yourself. And I think when people talk about, like, personal development and self-love, I think that bit is slightly forgotten.
Yes.
Is that it can help you answer a lot of those questions.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's really interesting that you say that you didn't have self-belief. And I'm just reflecting back on what you've just told me. When you were in hospital and you were told you're not going to be able to walk again, you're not going to be able to go to uni, you're not going to be able to live a normal life, did anyone say that you should just settle? In the sense that a lot of the time when people are told that they can't do something, so for example, for me, if I reflect back to my own experiences, when I was in school and I was told that, okay, you're never going to get the best grades, you're never going to get the best career, the people around me would then just say, okay, so what can you do within these remits, right? Like, you've been given these limitations, you cannot break through them. So now what can you do within these limitations? Did anyone ever say that to you? Did anyone tell you that you should listen to the doctors, you should stay within what they told you? Because I guess there's also this narrative around people don't want to give you false hope, and then people don't want to also bring you down.
Yeah,
so
of course.
how was that for you?
And yeah, look, the first thing I'm going to say is I am so grateful for my doctors. Like, they do incredible stuff, right? And this is not a thing against anyone. But I think, like, let's look at how we grew up. We're taught to trust, like, black and white, what anyone tells us. And I'm you know, so many of us know how damaging it is to just hear the word can't, or you'll never, or like, maybe you should just give up on this. Like, we listen to it and we believe it. And I think when your reality reflects it so much, you also convince yourself that, okay, this is the truth. And yeah, I had to really take a long look in the mirror and be like, Maya, okay, knowing that your life is going to look very different, what does that mean now? Is it, you know, living with your parents for the rest of your life? Is it 24/7 care? Is it you're going to have 60 tablets a day? Like, what does that look like? And I was slowly seeing what it did look like, you know, whether it was traveling and not being able to drive, or not being able to go for a walk without having an accident there and then. Like, it was harrowing to kind of accept what it could have been. I think it really comes down to, and you know, I never used to believe this stuff. When you hear those stories about, like, Roger Bannister, who did ran the mile in under 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Or you hear, like, people just break these world records. It's like they didn't relate to me in any way. But what I do genuinely believe in is that the limits that we have a lot of the time are mental. They really are. And there's I love this idea that it's like, if you're going to doubt anything, doubt your limits, not your potential.
Yes.
And I love that. I'm like, how interesting that we're the first to, like, doubt what we can do. And it's just like, well, why do that? And it even reminds me, like, the other day I'd gone to watch she was like an Iron Man, like, she's like a world champion. And I kind of asked her a similar question to be like, oh, like, why do you, like, how are you doing such incredible stuff? She's like 40 as well. Wow. And she was saying that she gave this one story how when she was doing the running piece of the Iron Man, everyone told her that the best it's ever been done was in, like, 40 minutes. Wow. That is, like, the best you can ever do it in. She was like, okay, like, she had a lot to do to get there, but she was like, fine, like, okay, I need to get there. And then she did it in 40 minutes. And then one time she did it in, like, 39. And she was like, wait a second. It's just because someone told me that it was gonna, like, 40 is the best it's ever been done.
Yes.
And then now she does it in 32.
Wow.
And I think it's super interesting. Like, humans are so strong, but yet because we are convinced by something, and that's how the brain works, right? The more you can convince it of something, you're more likely to make it happen. And I think at the beginning, I don't think self-belief just comes, or confidence just comes. In some ways, it's just like, what is louder? What are you telling your brain that's louder? And then eventually, yes, you will have self-belief, you will have confidence.
I love the story that you just mentioned about the Ironman, because we just went on holiday and Nikhil, my partner, and one of his friends went into the ice bath. Yeah. And they went into the ice bath the first time, they did like 10 seconds, and then they did 20, and then they did 40. And then the last time he said, I'm going to do a minute. And I said, I'll time you. So he went in, but he had his watch on, but it was under the ice. So when he went in, he was like, it must be done now. And I was like, no, you haven't done a minute. It's not a minute yet. You've still got 20 seconds. When he came out because he goes, oh, I've done a minute 20. And I'm like, so you put the limit in your mind that said, I'm only going to do 1 minute, but your body could push more.
Yeah.
And it really made me think in that moment that if he had said to himself, you time me, he could have maybe done 3 minutes.
Yeah.
He just wouldn't have known. It was just because he had seen the time that he thought, I must get out because I've told myself this. And it reminds me of that story that you just said, you know, she may have done it much quicker, but it's because she thought that 40-minute mark was so hard to achieve that she probably thought at that point, I'll slow down, or I'll go faster, or whatever it is. It's interesting that you said that you're really confident when you grow up, and then you went through this period of your life and then you had to build it up again. And I think a lot of people when they listen to this podcast, say, how do I become more confident? And I think this has been skewed right now on social media. You become more confident if you get more likes. You become more confident if you do your makeup right. You become more confident if you get BBL or you get your lips done or Botox or whatever. And I think we've attached confidence so much to external factors. But internal confidence, you built it up yourself. How did you build up your confidence?
So when it comes to building self-confidence, the first question you've got to ask yourself is, what's the difference for you between confidence and self-confidence? Because they're two different things, right? Confidence is what generally will be externally validated for. So it might be you walk into a room and someone's like, oh wow, you spoke so confidently. Or someone on, listening to this might be like, oh wow, she speaks so confidently. Obviously, I could be feeling awful right now. I could be super insecure. So is that really me being confident? And that's where self-confidence comes in. Self-confidence is, what do you think about yourself? How do you feel about yourself? When you are truly on your own, do you like yourself? And knowing those two is very different. Now, where it gets really interesting is most people are trying to improve their confidence. So they're trying to improve the way they show up in this world and what others think of them. That's not the right place to start. You want to start with self-confidence.
Yes.
Because that's what you can control. You can control the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you perform. And then naturally, external confidence will come from that. So if we come to, okay, how am I going to build this actual self-confidence? I think it comes down to three key things. One, it's the image you create of yourself. And again, this is where something like visualization can be very, very good.
Give me an example.
So I talk a lot about this in the book because I think it's a question I get a lot as well, is that really, if I look at the best champions in the world, they really go out their way to create a confident self-image.
Yes.
They don't just leave it by chance because no one's born with it. And so what that means is one, defining, okay, well, yeah, who do I want to be? When I walk into a room, what do I want to feel like? And then a lot of their coaches will ask them to close their eyes and actually rehearse that. And I'm going to use this word very intentionally, practice it. Practice being that confident person in your mind. Mentally rehearse it again and again. Because again, the more you repeat it, the brain and body start to actually do that. They start to act in alignment with it. Now, again, this isn't just okay, we're manifesting being confident. No, we're training ourselves to be like that. And so I've done this for years now. In the morning, I'll close my eyes and I'll actually see, okay, Maya, as you walk into a room, what's your body posture? When you're talking to someone, how do you talk to them? What's your tone of voice? Even when you're on your own and let's say you're just sitting there, how do you want to feel? And so that's really important to start showing your mind and body, this is who I want to be. The second part of self-confidence is your self-talk. It's so important. And that's not to say you've got to be positive all the time. I think that's a complete myth. When people say to me, oh my God, I just want to think positive, I'm like, but why? That's not the point of life. We're human. Of course, you're going to have negative thoughts. The point is, can you start to create a positive relationship with your thoughts? It's not about having positive thoughts all the time. That's boring. You've got to think holistically about what life is about, without going really, because obviously self-talk is massive, right?
It's huge,
so many things you can look at. The one thing I'd just say to start with is be conscious of it. And if you can, start every single day with just a phrase or a statement that can at least start your day well. So when I wake up every morning, I say, show me how good it gets and thank you. That's it. Because at least I'm starting my day on the right track. Instead of looking at social media, emails, whatever, I'm just saying, show me how good it gets and thank you. And what it does is it's like I wear these glasses that means that I have to find something that shows me how good it gets. And it's quite nice. And it starts to build that confidence in little things. And then two more things I'd say. Celebrate tiny, tiny, tiny wins, no matter how small they are. Just celebrate them. It can literally be, I had a great conversation with a friend. I ate healthier today. Celebrate it. We only celebrate the bigger stuff. But why? Because your brain doesn't actually know, if you're celebrating winning a gold medal at the Olympics versus you just celebrating because you decided to not have sugar in your tea today. Right. It doesn't really know. So actually, by you celebrating it, you are building that that excitement and that trust in yourself.
Don't you think we're becoming a bit, how do I put this, soft as a generation because we're just celebrating everything? So we celebrate the fact that I see a lot of people saying, I know I wanted to start my business, but I haven't done it for a year. And that's because for a year, I've really taken time out for myself. And I'm really celebrating the fact that I am, listening to my body.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think where I've seen celebrating little wins work the best is, let's say you do have an ambitious goal and you are needing to stay accountable in the process. Mm-hmm. That's where I think it works the best. Yeah. It does require enough action.
Right.
I think there's a balance between, does it become an excuse or a justification?
Yes.
Versus actually we're celebrating it.
Yeah.
And that's something that, each individual has to be honest with themselves about. It's not to say you celebrate anything and everything, but especially if it's towards a goal that you're going for. Because where I see confidence get destroyed very quickly is when people don't keep those promises to themselves.
Yes. And
they don't carry out the thing they wanted to. Or they get caught up with the comparing, the gossiping. And, it's so quick that it just dies because of that. And so it's as much as what you do as well as what you don't do, right?
100%. And I think one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about goal setting is that so often, like you said, the promises you keep to yourself are so important. But you cannot make these giant promises to yourself because then you're going to blame yourself. You're not going to blame the system. So when people are setting their goals, they say to themselves, okay, I want to read for 3 hours a day. Well, how long do you read now? Oh, I don't read anything. So what they then do is that instead of saying, oh, I'm going to read for 30 minutes a day, they set themselves this giant goal. And instead of then looking at that and thinking, okay, well, maybe it was a bit too much for me to do, they think, I'm so stupid. I didn't do it. I'm lazy. I'm unproductive. I'm never going to get to my goal. And that's why it's so important when you're setting a goal to make sure that it is manageable for you. And I don't think people talk about that enough.
Yeah, I think I totally agree when it's like habit-based goals.
Yes.
But I do think we're also scared to like dream big.
Oh, 100%.
And I think when you're thinking of your like aspirational goals, go for it, be 100%, big, but don't attach to it, right? Yes. Like I think have fun with those ones. When it's habit based, for sure. Like you've got to be disciplined with how you're going to set it. And I think that's why it's having a mixture of all those different types, where you've got that kind of guiding North Star that inspires you. You may not get there, 100%. But it's like, it's not really about that. It's just about the joy of perhaps trying to get there. And then you've got your ones like daily or monthly that you need to achieve to get, further.
Yeah, outcome-based goals, I tell everyone, dream big. But process-based goals, ones you're going to follow every single day, make sure that you stick to them because you are then going to identify yourself and rank yourself and rate yourself dependent on that. So if you want to say to yourself, I want to go to the gym 3 times a week, then go to the gym 3 times a week and go for 30 minutes if you're doing 0 now. Don't say I'm going to go 5 times a week and I'm going to go for 2 hours a day. You know what I mean? Because then you're breaking that promise yourself. And actually, it's not really based on you and your ability. It's based on the system that you created. You're unable to manage it.
Yeah, and look, I don't think a lot of people will like what I'm about to say, but I often hear so many, there are so many frameworks like SMART goals and ABC. Right. None of those work for me.
Really?
If I strip it back completely, like really completely, I just have one motto, which is big vision, act small and bold. Yeah. That is it. Because I sometimes think, like, if we go back to, like, even just take someone like Einstein. Right. Do you think he was thinking about SMART goals? No. Yeah. He had this goal and vision, then he just acted on it. Like, we've just become so distracted that's why we now need these frameworks. Right. But if you actually think about it, like, without any of that, you could still do it. So it really comes to this point of like, do you want it enough? Yeah. And sure, there are going to be elements where you need to maybe like tidy up your lifestyle a bit or like find that motivation. But fundamentally, if you can have that big vision that you can connect to and then you can act small, you will get far.
No, I agree with you. I do actually really disagree on the SMART goals part, just because I think that when you've got so many things going on, it's very important to use those metrics and that framework. But I do think what you're saying is right in terms of think about it simply. You have a big goal, break it down small and work on it every single day. Yeah. It's just because we are so distracted with so many other things that we have in our lives at the moment. I want to go back to what you said in the beginning, because you said that there were 3 types of visualization. and now they've expanded into 5.
Yeah.
Talk to me about all different 5 types and why they're so different.
Yeah, so I think this is really what's unique about, not only the information in the book that's coming, but also just in the work now that's happening in this space. When people think of visualization, they think of outcome-based,
Right.
where you are seeing the goal in advance, right? That's what we mostly know about. This is the most common type, often confused with manifestation.
Is there a difference?
Yeah, so I do think there is. And I think partly when I explain all the 5 types, it will become very clear. But I think as well, if I look at who has used outcome visualization for years and years, it really is some of the best athletes in the world. But we'd never say they manifested their medals or becoming world number 1. It's because they wired their brain for success. So naturally, okay, if you reach your goal quicker or you see opportunities, it's not because it just came into your life, right? You're actually training your brain in a certain way. But then let's look at the other 4 types. So process visualization is where you're using mental imagery to make a process better or faster or smarter. So that's where maybe an athlete or myself, we would use it to mentally rehearse, let's say, a public speaking gig. Even just coming before here, I will see, how do I want to act? What's my tone of voice? Or an athlete may see, what's their golf swing? It's not really about the outcome.
Right.
They're not controlling that. They're simply looking at, what are my movements? What are my hands doing? It's very process-based. It's to make your skills better.
Wow, okay.
Then creative is like what I mentioned. This is really useful for managing emotions, pain, disease, injuries. So it works on a more cellular level. I always explain it like, Inside Out, the movie. Yeah, so you can start using this to manage your emotions, but in a very creative and playful way. And people find this so effective when they're using it. Then we have negative visualization. Negative, I don't teach this to everyone because if your brain is already negatively wired, it's going to become worse.
Okay.
But this is where you see the worst case scenarios and you can see yourself overcoming them.
Right.
And another particular negative one, which is fascinating, is called the deathbed visualization. So let's say you've got a really big decision to make. You go see yourself on your deathbed and you make the decision from there.
Yeah.
And it's really clever. It puts into perspective, right? And a similar one as well is, let's say you're trying to stop smoking.
Right.
And you visualize what your life would look like if you continue to smoke. So your family may be leaving you, maybe you get quite obese, you get really unwell. That would scare someone more than visualizing, what does life look like when I don't smoke?
Right.
So you can see how it can change their behavior. So very interesting as well.
Amazing.
And then the last is explorative. And this is the oldest type of visualization, documented barely anywhere. And it's what people like Walt Disney, Einstein, and Nikola Tesla used. And they used it to create ideas, to problem solve, to, again, make certain decisions. Again, Einstein did this very famous one where instead of just making a decision, he would visualize seeing a train, and there are 2 train tracks. And he'd go on track number A, and he'd see... he'd use the train, though, as the metaphor, so he wouldn't actually be making the decision. And even Walt Disney, a lot of his storytelling or characters were all done through Explorative. And people find this really odd, but I create all my content through that. All of it. I don't spend time consciously making it. I will close my eyes, and I storyboard everything in my mind before I even do it.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a really cool way to tap into your creativity, basically.
I think I do all of those, bar from number 2, which is the cellular one. No, number 3.
That's creative.
Yeah, and the last one, I'm a bit unsure if I do it because I think I do sometimes. Talk to me about that. How would I know I'm doing it? Can we do an exercise to tap me into it?
So explorative. I mean, are you working on anything new or creative at the moment?
Yes.
Like a project.
Yes.
Okay, so with explorative, there's no end goal. We're not going in with a particular goal.
Got it.
We're using it to create new ideas.
Okay.
Right? So let's say you have well, I guess this is up to you. Do you want to do one for ideas or maybe decision making?
Ideas.
Ideas. Okay, fine. So what I would ask you to do is close your eyes. Okay, first just take a deep breath. And exhale. Okay. So with the slight kind of seed or idea that you have already, I just want you to let that plant into your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to use your mind just like a whiteboard. It's a blank canvas right now. And I want you to think as wild and as crazy, but also interesting or small, big as you want to. And I just want you to start seeing and actually visualizing all the possible things you could do with this idea. There's no limits at this point, no limits at all. Your imagination is purely limitless.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want you to spend a few moments letting this seed just grow and see all the different possibilities and start noticing the ones you perhaps connect to a bit more or that excite you a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
There might be some you're a bit like, oh no, so just put those to a side and become conscious of how your body feels as well in this moment. Like, are you feeling it expand? Does it make you feel a bit tight as well? And just again, stay here for like 30 seconds more. Really see all those ideas. Just download it like it's data or information. And tap into that creativity, that part of you that perhaps is suppressed in our conscious mind. Like, if there were no limits here, what could you create? And then just gently open your eyes. Okay, so normally with this now, what I would ask someone to do is just write down every single idea they have.
Got it.
And then once you've done that, which is very divergent, then you can use something like outcome visualization to actually converge it slightly more. But this was just a quick idea of like when you can use your brain as a complete whiteboard, no limits, it pushes you to just go beyond what you're meant to do or like what you should do.
Right.
So even when it came to like, creating my events or things like that, I use the exact same process to just be like, well, okay, what do I want it to look like? What could all the possibilities be?
I really love that we did this exercise just now, and I really hope everyone at home just took that time to sit with their thoughts.
Yeah.
Because I think, like you said in the beginning, people don't ask themselves what they want. And that was really nice to me. I mean, I do think about that a lot. I ask myself that question. I think you said do it weekly. I do it like every day. I'm like, what is it that I want? I'm always so confused because it changes a lot for me. But I think about that a lot. And so I think about all those things I just thought about. But it was very nice to kind of do it in a more of a whiteboard way.
Yeah.
And also think about it with those questions that you asked, which I think is really nice. I want to ask you, what is the difference between a visualization and manifestation?
I believe in manifestation because ultimately I believe that what you create in your mind can happen, right? It can become something. That is what I see as manifestation. The thing about
thoughts becoming a reality, is that what you define? Yeah, okay.
Exactly. I think the really big difference here is that to me and how I teach it, but also to others who've used it, visualization is a mental fitness tool. If I were to start using, or as I use visualization for public speaking, that's not me manifesting being a good public speaker. That is me training very hard to be a good public speaker.
100%.
Same with like creative visualization. I'm not manifesting my pain going away. No, I'm using the power of my imagination and specific intentional instructions to help it. And so I do understand why people use visualization for manifesting, especially outcome. That's fine, that's part of it. If it helps you get more clearer and you see your vision, go for it. But again, that's not because it doesn't, see the thing I struggle with is especially at the beginning of the year, you'll get people just saying, okay, here's my vision board, let me just now manifest it. I'll do this one visualization. But I'm like, okay, but imagine if you actually invested in your mental fitness every day, just like your physical fitness. And so my big message with this is that this isn't just a one-time thing. When you can actually learn to train your brain with visualizations, literally the way you think, feel, and perform changes.
Yeah.
So that's why I want to redefine what visualization is about, because visualization is also known as mental imagery. We never say that is manifestation.
Yeah.
And I think because of so much of what I teach it comes from the most elite athletes, and you ask them, they would never say that, I manifested my, US Open trophy. They would just not say that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of confusion. I get some messages from people. I remember when I did an event, someone messaged me saying, manifesting meeting you. And I'm like, we don't have to manifest it. You can come.
Yeah,
you can do it.
Yeah.
And there's this confusion. I think that the word is just being thrown around everywhere as like a dream or a wish.
Yeah.
You do need to take action in order for things to come true. I think that's a really clear thing. I want to talk a little bit about why people should visualize. What are the key benefits that you've seen with the clients that you coach in your own personal experience? Because we know what it does, but how can somebody at home who's perhaps not going for a gold medal or trying to win the Olympics or, trying to start a brand new business, how can they see the benefits of it, and why should they visualize?
Obviously, so the benefits are just endless in that way. I guess the first bit of context I want to give is that most of us, we grew up, whether we were going to PE class or we knew it was very good to train our bodies and we'd go to the gym. But genuinely, in a room of like 100 people, I'd say maybe 2 people raise their hand when I ask who trains their mind. And I think that's really sad. I think it's sad that we've grown up in a society that just completely neglects the brain, even though it is literally half your health and it determines everything you do. So I think the first point is that if you are not training your mind, you will be at a disadvantage, like 100%. How it can help you, I mean, there are so many different examples, but I'll take like, okay, so if we went on like confidence, for example. So I worked with one of my clients called Alex for a while, and you know, she is a working professional, and she kind of just she was a bit similar to me when I was younger, where she'd appear quite confident, but she just felt like an imposter all the time. And I think it's such a tiring process where you've got this like conflict of what others think of you and then how you actually feel. It was super fun to work with her because we kind of stripped it all back and was like, if you had to build yourself from like scratch again, who would you want to be? Despite what other people think, and even overcoming this idea of other people's opinions. These are all just behaviors and patterns that our brain is used to.
Yes.
And so we spent a lot of time not only visualizing, again, like we were saying, the self-image side of stuff, but actually we went back to where her fear of people's opinions even came from. And why she even felt like she was an imposter. So for her, a lot of it was process visualization.
Yes.
But then take someone like Sam, who actually was not an elite athlete, but just loved to play tennis. He was great in training, but whenever he played like little tournaments, he would absolutely like crumble under pressure. And that's the same with a lot of people I find if they're like on a podcast or they have to do a presentation at work. Like they know they can do it, but under pressure, it just, everything they remember goes. And so imagine, right, if I said to you, obviously you won't need to do this because you do this podcast, but if I said to you, right, go and speak on 100 stages.
Right.
By the end of those 100 stages, you'd probably be a bit better, right?
100%.
Exactly. We don't have time for that.
No.
And a lot of the time our doubt and fear would stop us from even doing it.
Yeah.
But instead, if you were to mentally rehearse being on 50, 70 stages, your mind and body think you've done it.
Yes.
So that when you're there, it's like, oh, okay, this isn't as scary as I thought. Or actually, this is very familiar to me.
Yes.
So this is a very common application, is being able to actually rewire certain experiences and skills so that you can be a better public speaker. You can perform better in your sports, no matter at what stage you're at. Another interesting thing I used it for really recently was actually for a breakup, to be like, well, you know when you're in a situation and you have so much to say, but then you never can actually say it because in the moment it's like everything just goes or emotions take over. It's a great way, again, to really mentally rehearse being in that situation and saying what you need to say.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this. When I've had to deal with a breakup,
Yeah.
I will be in the shower and I will rehearse the whole situation in my head. And then when I get there, I think I've already said it.
Yeah.
So I forget the points.
Yeah.
I also think it's a nightmare for me. I used to do that a lot, by the way. I don't do it anymore. I used to, whenever I used to have a difficult conversation, I used to like go over it a million times in my head and I would talk about it and I would expect what the reaction was going to be and I would kind of role play. What I found was, number one, it didn't help me because I was overthinking the entire situation. So I was putting my body into a state of like shock and sadness and upset. And in reality, that situation didn't happen. And I was almost waiting for them to say something horrible to me and then they didn't. And number two, I felt that, well, this is personal. When I've said something and I've rehearsed it, I think I've already said it. So then when I see that person, I forget what's real and what's not real. What's the difference between overthinking and just going through a situation before it's happened? Rehearsing for it, I guess.
I think, what I will just say in response to what you just mentioned is that we can't control anyone else's reaction. So when you are, let's say, visualizing or mentally rehearsing a conversation, there is no point trying to predict what they're going to do. There's just no point. There are some situations where I would take a client through like worst case scenarios if it was helping them, let's say in an interview or something. Yes. But other than that, I wouldn't recommend it, because that is so easy to overthink. What if they say this? What am I going to... Like, it doesn't help us.
Yeah.
In those situations, the reason why it's good is, in some ways, I see it a bit like a performance, right? If you know it's a hard conversation and you know that normally in those, types of situations, you don't tend to actually say what you really feel, that's why it can be really helpful. Now, naturally, if you are an overthinker, then of course, this is about you understanding your brain. Perhaps it's not then about, really seeing the conversation in its full detail, and that's okay. I think this is what's important, right? Is that there is no one size fits all. Like when you go to the gym, you probably don't do the same thing I do. That's great. That's good. And I think that's why, like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, these are the 5 bits of advice you need for visualization. It doesn't really work like that. You've got to understand your brain, how it works, and then know where to apply it in what different scenarios. And so, yes, like if you know you're naturally, prone to overthinking, then I don't think process visualization will be the one for you. Right. Neither probably negative. But that isn't to say that you can't improve that. Learn how to, and a lot of the time overthinking is underfeeling anyway. So there might be something that we're maybe scared, but we don't want to feel that, or we are nervous. Often when we just allow ourselves to understand, okay, this is quite an anxiety inducing situation, how do I want to act from it? Yeah. And I do understand when you said to me, like, well, if I rehearse it so many times, then it's like I've forgotten if I've actually said it. And that's why I think there's an element of like, how much do we do it?
Yes.
When with something like public speaking, that's a great thing actually. If you know you've done it so many times that it's like, well, this is like my bread and butter then, right?
Yes.
And so you can see how that can help someone. But again, with a situation like a hard conversation, maybe you want to try it once or twice rather than doing it like every day for a week. And that's going to signal nerves as well, right? So it's about having those boundaries into what type of rehearsal you're doing as well.
One of the questions that somebody asked me to ask you was, how do I visualize without closing my eyes? Because I don't like to do it on the train and I don't like to do it in the car. So how can I visualize with my eyes open? Can you? It's a hard one.
Yes, you can do it. I would say when you're first on your journey of visualization, the reason that I ask people to close their eyes is simply to give yourself the best chance of focus. Because if we do it with our eyes open, you've just got all the sensory environment, basically. If you're going to do it with your eyes open, I would pick like a wall, like a space, blank, and just stare at that. So nothing else around you. And look, I get it. Like, training your mind in public can be embarrassing or things like that. I mean, I do it on the train. I do it on benches in Oxford Circus. And I think it's just, again, it's that thing of like, well, if we run and we walk in public, why can't we do the same with our mind? But I get it. If you're not comfortable just yet, then you can do it with your eyes open, but I would just really focus on one particular space. Yeah. And because otherwise it's just not as effective for you to really concentrate on the vision.
Yeah, I love that. Another question that somebody asked me, how do I make sure that I'm using visualization as a tool for growth rather than an escape from the present? Because we can visualize ourselves living in this amazing life, and we can do that to almost become delusional because we don't want to face what's going on. So if I just think about this the whole day and I sleep the whole day and I close my eyes the whole day and I think about this amazing life, I don't have to deal with what I'm going through.
I'll answer this in kind of 2 ways. I actually think partly when I started, I probably was doing it to escape my reality a little bit because it was giving me that just moment of relief in some ways. It can obviously get dangerous to a point of like, especially if you're escaping perhaps things you need to address in your day to day. And I think this is where, again, it's making that gap between where you are and what you're trying to visualize, maybe not too far then, because if it feels so completely different and out of this world kind of thing, then clearly, right, there's going to be some level of escaping. So really it's asking yourself, well, why am I visualizing this? Yeah. If it is what you really, really want, then again, it has to be combined with action. Yeah. And I would, really consider and suggest you add outcome and process together. The fact that question's even being asked tells me that you're probably escaping something. Yes. So again, you've got to be honest with yourself. Like, what are you escaping? Yeah. And actually, once you can address that and you can really be honest there, imagine how much better and maybe even how much more aligned your visualizations will be. But don't be hard on yourself either. We're human, and sometimes we do need to escape things sometimes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But the point is, for the long term, that's never going to sustain.
Yeah.
So you want your goal to be something that feels exciting. Let it pull you to something that you're excited to grow towards, rather than just being this thing that is so different from where you are. So different.
So your book Visualize, when it comes out, I'm sure it details your journey in terms of uncovering visualization, finding it. What would be the one thing that you want people to take away from that book, or one exercise or one tool that will allow them to use visualization in the best way possible?
Well, my one takeaway is that your mind is like a puppy, and if you don't train it, it will shit everywhere.
Yeah. I love that quote. I heard it in your other podcast.
You know, I couldn't say it. Someone had to tell me I had to change it from shit to poop, and I was like,
I love it. So
great.
good.
Doesn't have the same
Yeah,
oomph,
exactly.
You know? But see, I think the book is really interesting because it goes through everything from the basics of how the brain works, as well as how to build a champion mindset. And I think that's what really excites me, is that when I read all these books about champions, it just didn't relate to me. It really didn't.
Why?
Because I wasn't going for the Olympic gold. I wasn't number one in the world at football. Like, I wasn't doing any of those things. But actually, it's really interesting that when I started applying the tools they used, like, it's amazing what you can also achieve in your own life. And I genuinely believe everyone can develop a champion mindset. Everyone. And we all have room to grow in you know, how we are thinking, the way we manage our emotions, the way we are even going for our goals. In terms of exercises, I think I went a little bit overboard in the book with the amount of exercises in there, because I think that's the thing is, so I do this, right? You read a book and then what?
Right. How do you apply it?
Exactly. Like, what do
Yeah.
you do with it? And I just didn't want people to make that mistake, because visualization is not something to just read about. It just doesn't work. You've got to do it.
Right.
So no matter how many books there are on it, like, it doesn't really matter. And so I think with it as well, it's an opportunity for people to find the parts of it that work for them. I'm not going to sit here and be like, this is for every single person out there. But
Right.
you've got to go on your own journey to experiment with it, because otherwise, like, it's literally the same as physical fitness.
Got it.
Some people love Pilates, others don't.
Right.
Like, it's okay. It's not that it has to be correct. It's just that find what works for you. And the great thing about it is you might do an exercise and you'll feel different. And that in
Right.
itself is a great signal to be like, hey, this has actually changed my day.
Yeah.
Now, if I do it more and more, this could change my year. And then again and again, okay, now it's made a considerable change in my life.
So if I want to build a champion mindset and I want to be the number one podcaster in the world, what tools would you recommend to me? What exercises could I personally do?
So I think with a champion mindset, one, it's perspective, always perspective, and always see direction as more important than speed.
Okay.
With the exercises, yes, you want your non-negotiable goal and vision to be your, like, just the thing you are seeing every day, no matter how long it takes. It shouldn't be a time-bound goal at this point. It should simply be, if I want to be the number one podcaster in the world, Europe, whatever, I'm going to see it. I'm really going to see it. It's exactly what I did with the whole Nike trainer thing. That wasn't even a job. Like, it
Amazing.
wasn't a thing. So it has to be so clear and inspiring for you, so that it's not like... So an average mindset will be like, oh my gosh, how long will this take? A champion mindset will say however long it takes.
Got it.
Subtle but very important difference. Once you have that, then it's about coming back to, okay, so in my day-to-day, how can I be bolder with, let's say, it's the people I'm meeting, or it might be even the way I'm podcasting. What can I do that's slightly different that no one else is doing? What can I do to really make me stand out? Because in this day and age, it's noise as well.
Yes.
And so it doesn't have to be massive or different. It just has to be the tiny, tiny things. They compound. And if you look at the champions, they get the basics so world class. So world class. And I actually think sometimes if you look at the podcasting space, people can spend thousands on production.
Yes.
But it's like, if you don't have the basics right, which is the good questions, the good listening, doesn't make a difference.
So true.
So get the basics and also just have that clear vision in it. And I think the other side of it is champions never do it alone. If I look at all the greatest, they're not just like, they don't do it on their own, right? Whether they have a coach, they have a team, it's all there. It's not just them. And a lot of people think they're just lone wolves, but they're not. Actually, most of the time it's the team doing the stuff, or it's their coaches.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important as well.
Love that. So powerful. And what's one quote that has changed your life in terms of visualization?
I'll give you 2 quotes I love. So the one that really harnesses visualization the best, I think, was when Einstein said that logic can take you from A to B, but imagination can take you everywhere.
Yeah.
And I really like it because, again, it comes back to that question of limits. When we're always thinking logically, it will be A to B. But if we use our imagination, we can go beyond. We can see C and D or Z and what, and that's amazing.
Yes.
I think the quote that hit me the hardest ever comes from Usain Bolt. He said, I trained 4 years to run 9 seconds of my life. And most people, they try something for about 2 months and they give up.
Right.
And it's so true. Again, it's just the world we live in.
Yeah.
When we don't see results instantly,
Yes.
we give up on it.
So
But
true.
things that are really going to last, especially with your mind or your body or perspective, it's not an overnight thing. It's just not. And if it is, I don't think it's going to last, right? And we've got to be disciplined. And I think hearing that made me realize, yeah, like true discipline, I think is the best form of growth or self-love, self-development we can give ourselves. And thankfully, it's not just 9 seconds and then 4 years, thankfully. But yeah, like let's actually commit to something, commit to it and see what can happen.
I love that quote because it also reminds me of something that I spoke to Joe about. And it was around stop looking at the role and start looking at the responsibility. How many people say, I want to be a mum and I want to have 5 kids, and they don't look at the responsibility that holds for them? How many people say, I want that promotion, I want that title, but they forget about the responsibility? And so often we can say that we want this accolade, we want this prize. And again, when you're visualizing, I think it's so important. When you're visualizing what you want, it's very easy to see yourself on stage doing all of these things. And it's very easy to overlook, like you said, all those steps, the process visualization that you need to do in order to get there. Because if you're not willing to do the process visualization, I don't think you should be doing the outcome visualization.
Yeah.
And I taught that in my workshop. I said, so often it's easy for me to visualize, you know, being on stage and being with Oprah. It's not easy for me to visualize staying up till 3 a.m. editing and going through everything vigorously and researching and doing all of this stuff. That's what I need to visualize because that's what I struggle with.
Yeah.
I don't struggle thinking about me sitting in a conversation with Oprah.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And I think I love that quote by Usain Bolt because I think it really links to that.
Yeah, and to be fair, like in a very tangible example as well, is like when I, you know, a few years ago, I was like, yeah, I'm going to build the next Calm and Headspace. And that's like always been my goal.
Right.
And then it was really funny. I was looking at the ins and outs of Headspace, and it's like mainly it's a tech company, right?
Right.
And then I saw myself like managing 100 engineers. And oh my God, in my visualization, I was like, this is so the opposite of what I want to do in my life.
Right.
And I made the decision right there and then, don't do this anymore.
Love that.
And it wasn't like I'm scared of it. It was like, this just does not light me up.
100%.
Yeah, and I
It's
think...
not like I can't do it.
Exactly.
It's like, I don't want to spend my life doing that. That's not your area of expertise.
Yeah, well, and I just don't... That's just not how I want to live my life. I don't want to be managing like 100 engineers. It's just not who I want to be. And I know that.
Right.
And I think if I hadn't have visualized it, I probably still would have been on that trajectory right now. So it's just little things like that we forget that our mind can help us. It's on our side, but we forget that.
I love that. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, of course.
So excited for your book. So excited to be doing more of that 5th level of visualization to help me think about new ideas. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.